Well, hello. Welcome to today's webinar hosted by the Association of Food and Drug Officials. My name is Jerry Voitala, and I'm the Executive Director of IFPTI. Thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar will highlight some of the IFPTI Fellowship in Food Protection Cohort 8 Fellows as they present their research projects. This is the third and last installment of presentations for Cohort 8. These presentations are the culmination of a unique year-long leadership program funded under a cooperative agreement by the FDA Office of Training, Education, and Development. Today, we will be experiencing 4 project presentations. As for the format, the fellows have been given strict requirements to consolidate the presentation of their project into a 10-minute segment, followed by questions from the audience. If you would like to ask a question while the fellow is presenting, go to the bottom of your Zoom screen and type your question in the Q&A box. We may not get to all of your questions in the interest of time, so feel free to contact the fellow by email. It will be displayed on your screen during the question period, so watch for that. So I think we're ready to begin. Katie Jo, would you like to kick us off?
Absolutely. I apologize. Okay. So I apologize. My name is Kathleen Close, and I'm with the Food and Drug Administration. I work for the OHAPO audit staff in the immediate office, and I reside in the state of Iowa. And today I will be speaking about my evaluation of performance factors rated needs improvement during federal and state regulatory field inspection audits. I'd like to start by providing background information. Regulatory health officials are in charge of protecting public health. Consequently, the level of public health protection depends upon inspector competency and the regulatory program's quality assurance program. My research centered around 2 quality assurance programs used by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and the state regulatory programs enrolled in the FDA's Manufactured Food Regulatory Program Standard, also known as MFRPS. The FDA offers inspection contracts to state regulatory agencies, which then are subject to FDA's quality assurance program. FDA audits all food contract inspectors to ensure that the quality of inspections purchased through contracts are adequate and comply with contract requirements. This procedure is set forth in Field Management Directive 76, also known as FMD 76. The state programs that are enrolled in FDA's Manufactured Food Regulatory Program Standards, also known as MFRPS, are required to have a quality assurance program for all inspectors conducting manufactured food inspections. Both quality assurance programs require 2 audits per inspector every 36-month period. Both also assess inspector performance using the same 22 performance factors. Next, I'll illustrate what these 2 field inspection audit forms look like. The image depicted on your left is the contract audit form required under Field Management Directive 76. It is often referred to as the FDA 3610 form. The image depicted on your right is the current field inspection audit form required under Standard 4 of the MFRPS. It is often referred to as Appendix 4.5. I'd like to point out that each question is to be answered by checking either acceptable or needs improvement. The problem my research pursued to address is that overall, state and federal regulatory field inspection audit performance trends are unknown. Next, I will identify questions that I hope to answer from my research. My research questions were as follows. Number one, which performance factors are marked needs improvement? The second, what are the top 3 performance factors marked needs improvement? And the third, which section of the audit form has the most needs improvement ratings? Now let's discuss the research methodology in my study. The data of focus was field inspection audits that were performed between January 1st, 2015 and January 1st, 2018. So that's the 3-year period that I'm focusing on. MFRPS non-contract audit records are maintained by the individual state program. FDA contract audit records are maintained by FDA, the ORA, the Office of Partnerships. State programs were surveyed by the Association of Food and Drug Officials, also known as AFTO, for their MFRPS non-contract audit records. I obtained FDA contract audit records for the same state programs who submitted data internally from FDA's Office of Partnerships. I compiled all field inspection audit records together in Microsoft Excel. I was able to compare and contrast the information, and Excel helped me analyze performance factor trends by interpreting the information using graphs. Let's talk about the study population. The study population consists of state and federal regulatory agencies. Most specifically, there were 10 state programs enrolled in MFRPS. I decided to keep the state identification confidential since the subject matter relates to inspection performance. I received complete audit records from 774 audits, and of the 774 audit records, there were 469 were contract audits, so FMB 76 audits, and 305 were MFRPS non-contract audits. And before I go any further, I'd like to acknowledge that my study only focused on performance factors that were rated needs improvement. This presentation does not provide the whole picture of the quality of work that the state regulatory programs do, and I can assure you that FDA is very pleased with and maintains confidence in the regulatory work performed by the states. Just to give you an idea, of the 774 audits, that equated to 84,784 total performance factors to assess. And so during that 3-year period, there were only 621 needs improvement. So that is about less than 1%. So without further ado, I'll share the results of my research study. This graph illustrates audit performance factor results from 774 total audits during the 3-year period. The study found that there were needs improvement ratings for each of the 22 performance factors. The 3 most common needs improvement ratings came from the inspection observation performance section of the audit form, which were program elements II.3, II.4, and II.5, which are depicted within the orange box. II.3 pertains to the assessment of employee practices critical to safe production and storage of food, and II.4 relates to the evaluation of the likelihood that conditions, practices, components, and/or labeling could cause the product to be adulterated or misbranded. And then II.5 assesses the inspector's recognition and recording of the significant findings. Next, I'd like to present my findings in graph form when comparing audit results between the 2 quality assurance programs during the same period. The bar line graph illustrates the audit results between the 2 quality assurance programs during the same period to be very much the same. The blue bars represent the FDA contract audit results, whereas the orange line represent MFRPS non-contract audit results. And so the top 3 performance factors marked needs improvement are identical. However, the rank position varies slightly between the 2 quality assurance programs. Most specifically, the rank position for program element II.3 and II.5, they swap. Next, I will present my findings based upon this section. The performance factors reside on the audit form. The audit form is divided into 4 sections, and the inspection observations and performance section have the most needs improvement response ratings at 424. And then using a pie chart, I was able to display the same data, but you're able to see that 68.27% of the data, or of the total amount of needs improvement ratings, came from the inspection observation and performance section of the audit form. Next, I will discuss my conclusions. The study concludes that needs improvement performance rating trends between FMD 76 contract audits and MFRPS non-contract audits are very similar. The most prevalent needs improvement performance ratings are linked to general conduct in the inspection observations and performance area, which is the core of a regulatory inspection. Regardless of the audit type, the most frequent needs improvement performance rating during the 3-year was associated with the inspector's evaluation of potential causes of adulteration or misbranding. This study highlights the necessity for state and federal regulatory partners to share field inspection performance audit trends so that meaningful corrective action decisions can be made to address the national trend. In conclusion, I will be recommending the following. A reciprocal commitment to share individual audit performance trends should be made between FDA and the state programs that are enrolled in the Manufactured Food Regulatory Program standards. And in doing so, this will help establish a national trend. FDA should consider sharing national needs improvement performance ratings with their Office of Training, Education, and Development, also known as OTED. The state regulatory programs and FDA should consider brainstorming ideas on how to reduce the national needs improvement performance rating trends. Such ideas may include local or regional on-site trainings and monthly webinars. FDA should consider creating a mechanism that allows for state regulatory programs to provide instant feedback to the Office of Training, Education, and Development. The Office of Training, Education, and Development should consider ways to update fundamental training courses to assist in reducing the national needs improvement performance rating trend. And they should also consider a mechanism to relay new training and or guidance that directly affects inspection observations and performance to past course participants. The FDA should also consider updating their field inspection audit program to require the same audit frequency for consumer safety officers working in the field. In addition, they should consider evaluating and reporting audit findings using the same 22 performance factors that are listed in the FDA Form 3610. And if they do so, I'm also recommending that after 3 years of instituting that this study be repeated. My success in this endeavor stems from the support from FDA, AFDO, and IFPTI, as well as the love of my life, Josh Close. So at this time, I'd like to take any questions that you may have.
Okay, so thank you, Katie. So just a reminder, go down to your Q&A box, and some folks use the chat box, but if you could keep it in the Q&A box, that would be good. And go ahead and ask your questions or any questions you have of Katie. And Katie, I've got some coming in here. One question for you is, how many state audit programs are currently involved with MFRPS, and do you see that number increasing in the future?
I don't have the exact number readily available, but I can definitely find that out. I want to say it's about 30, 31 maybe. But please, whoever asked that question, please feel free to send me an email and I will respond back to you with the exact number. But I do hope that the number increases.
Got it, good. And yeah, as Katie Jo reminded you, you can see her email address right on the screen under the question line. Another question, Katie Jo, your slide 14 shows that the audit trends for audits of contract inspections to be similar to the audit trends of MFRPS inspections. However, the actual numbers within each category are typically less for MFRPS inspections than those for contract inspections. What do you believe may attribute to the typically higher numbers for contract inspections versus those for MFRPS inspections?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So you kind of have to think about what the like where the data comes from. And so as a background, the FDA has 3 audit phases within their audit program. And the first phase is where the FDA actually performs the field inspection audit of the state inspector. The second phase is where FDA and the state share responsibility to do that. Actually, FDA will pay the state under contract to do some of those. Phase 3 is where the state has the responsibility to perform the audit of their state inspectors, and FDA doesn't do any of that. And so I just want to make sure that I'm transparent when I say that of the 10 states that I reviewed data from, they were in the phase 2 and phase 3 category. So that means that the data that we are seeing in that graph, it's a mixture of both FDA employees and state employees, qualified auditors who are performing that audit on the state employee. Now, having said that, I think that some of the questions, like for instance, the second question on the form talked about equipment. And so we know that there are certain pieces of equipment for state inspections, and then there's also additional equipment required for FDA inspections. And so, that could be a very, one of the reasons why that second question is a little bit higher and needs improvement than for the state.
Okay, got it. Good. And we do have another question coming in on the Q&A line here. And you mentioned the Office of Training, Education, and Development. So what type of ongoing training does FDA provide to state inspectors and state programs? So if you can let our audience kind of know how that works.
Yeah, sure. I can tell you what I'm aware of. I certainly am not probably the right person to speak on behalf of the Office of Training and Education Development. But the state inspectors have the ability and access to our training portal systems, our learning management systems, I believe is what they're called. They are, so that means that they can attend on-site trainings. There are on-demand videos. And then also, if they have a contract with us, with FDA, they can go on the job trainings, through the FDA division or district. That is always something that is available. I know that there are some divisions that offer monthly trainings to their staff, and that those invitations are also provided to the state as well. But every division operates a little bit differently. So, but for the most part, the Office of Training and Education and Development, they do provide training, regardless if it's for FDA or for the state.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you. And you do have another question here. Out of the 774 inspections, how many inspection audits exceeded 4 needs improvements or less than 80%?
That is a really good question. And my study did not focus on that. I can go back and review that and of course get back to whoever asked the question, but that was really outside of the scope of my study.
Okay, fair enough. Yep. Here's another question. We have had problematic manufacturing facilities in our local jurisdiction. Can we reach out to the FDA for assistance?
I would definitely encourage you to maybe work through your FDA state contacts. More than likely, it's a state liaison. And if you could have those discussions with that individual, you know, maybe the division would be able to assist you.
Okay. Well, and I think the questions are slowing down at this point, Katie Jo, so I'll just thank you for your presentation. Great job. And
you're welcome. Thank you.
If you can give up the screen at this point, and we'll move on to our next presenter. Leo, would you like to take over?
Sure, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lydia Luchenko. I'm a food inspector with New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets. It is my pleasure today to present my IFPTI Fellowship Research Project titled Major Food Safety Challenges Associated with Retail Sushi Inspections. Allow me to provide you a little bit of background. There are firms that lease space within supermarkets to manufacture and sell sushi at retail. In New York State, these firms are required to obtain their own license and apply for specialty food variants before beginning operations. These firms hire and train their own staff in the art of the sushi preparation. Retail in-store made sushi is a rapidly growing market. It originated in the late 1970s, early 80s on the West Coast, California, and it slowly made its move across the nation. And now they're common in urban centers across America, and the entire industry is estimated to be worth over $1 billion. During sushi preparation, raw seafood is combined with cooked rice, and rice is maintained at room temperature during sushi preparation because cold rice does not roll as easily, so it's not practical. So in addition to regular agents of foodborne illness, there's one particular pathogen of concern that is unique when it comes to sushi preparation. Bacillus cereus is a toxin-producing endospore-forming bacteria that is widespread in the environment and routinely contaminates rice during harvest. Bacillus cereus and spores and toxins are heat-resistant. Thus, these spores and toxins may survive the cooking process, and Bacillus cereus will multiply quickly at room temperature. Okay. Ingestion of B. cereus causes nausea and vomiting. Fortunately, these symptoms typically subside within 24 hours. By CDC estimates, there are over 60,000 cases of Bacillus cereus foodborne illness in the United States every year, but actual number may be higher due to underreporting or misdiagnosis. Sometimes B. cereus gets confused with Staphylococcus aureus and Clostridium perfringens. Since keeping cooked rice refrigerated during sushi preparation is not feasible, sushi chefs rely on vinegar to reduce pH of rice and create an inhospitable environment for the growth of Bacillus cereus. Bacillus cereus typically grows when pH exceeds 4.3. Therefore, normally sushi chefs try to aim for target pH of 4.1 or below. These retail sushi establishments are required to use pH meter to control pH and verify proper acidification of rice. To ensure safe and consistent acidification of rice, during each and every sushi preparation, a chef is expected to be able to properly calibrate the pH meter using, as you can see, 4 and 7 pH buffer solutions, as well as to take and prepare a right ratio of rice to water, because they make the slurry and they insert the pH meter probe in it. And they're also supposed to take proper care of the pH meter by properly cleaning it with the distilled water to preserve the life of a probe. Records of pH measurements are required to be kept on site. So sushi chefs are supposed to meet all these requirements while typically working alone without supervision. Thus, we arrive at my problem statement. The extent of sushi-specific food safety training for retail sushi manufacturers is unknown. And these are my 3 research questions. What are the top 5 critical deficiencies associated with inspections of retail sushi firms in New York State by New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets in the downstate regions of New York? 2, what sort of training do retail sushi firms provide to their employees? And 3, what are the training requirements for in-store sushi retail manufacturers in other jurisdictions around the nation? My methodology can be broken down in 4 phases. Phase 1 consisted of analyzing the inspection data from New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets. Phase 2 consisted of interviewing individual retail sushi operators, so the chefs who are responsible for controlling the pH and taking measurements. Phase 3 consisted of surveying other jurisdictions around the country. And Phase 4 consisted of surveying. I chose downstate regions of New York because it's a densely populated area. There's a lot of demand for sushi on the go. And as a result, majority of New York State in-store sushi manufacturers are concentrated in this area. So what I did, I looked at the inspection data for a 2-year calendar period between 2018 and 2019. And I sorted the database using the keywords such as sushi, fish, and seafood. And then I reviewed individual reports to eliminate wholesale seafood establishments because they're already covered by seafood hazard. And I just focused on retail sushi firms. I reviewed those reports and I tallied up the major critical deficiencies by major categories. Okay, Phase 2 consisted of the in-person surveys regarding sushi preparation training. They were conducted in the field following the completion of an inspection. These surveys were voluntary and anonymous. They were standardized and consisted of yes, no questions. Phase 3, I used the Association of Food and Drug Officials Directory of State and Local Officials to contact various jurisdictions around the nation to inquire about their training requirements for sushi preparation. For Phase 4, I sent out emails to individual retail sushi chain representatives to get information about training trends in the industry. Okay, and this slide represents the results from the Phase 1, where I looked at the critical deficiencies and I grouped them by major categories. So while the temperature abuse food category is the single largest category, more than half, or rather 56% of critical deficiencies can be traced back to the improper use of pH meter and lack of training. Another interesting finding was that in 60% of failing inspections, there was noted a lack of pH meter instructions. So employees on site did not have written instructions to follow, which kind of explains why their critical deficiency could be traced back to that. Phase 3, I did the jurisdictional surveys. I had several replies, and while those jurisdictions do expect food operators to have food safety training, there's nothing on the books about sushi-specific training. They're expected to know what to do, but can't really turn around and direct them to a particular organization that will do it for them. And Phase 4, whether because they were feeling shy or the email ended up in a spam folder, I did not receive a response from the sushi chains. And these are my conclusions. A majority of food safety violations at retail sushi firms are sushi specifics as they relate to improper use of pH meter, lack of records, or unavailability of the pH meter there. Training and guidance documents vary greatly between different retail sushi firms. So some firms, they do go an extra mile and they provide their employees with custom training guides, others do not. And while various jurisdictions throughout the United States acknowledge having basic food safety training requirements, retail sushi firms are currently free to determine their own training standards. And there are a couple of recommendations that came up with. Food safety risk associated with the retail sushi establishment should be reassessed. An increased inspection frequency of retail sushi firms should be considered. And another recommendation that came up is when inspections at retail sushi firms are conducted, a greater focus needs to be placed on individual operator skill set. Operators should be able to demonstrate proficiency with a pH meter during an inspection. Continue with the recommendations. Another one is prior to beginning operations, retail sushi firms need to demonstrate to regulatory agencies that they have an adequate food safety training program in place. And all stakeholders, regulators, industry, and food safety experts should contribute towards the development of a comprehensive food safety training curriculum for retail sushi operators. This training would be standardized and included a practical, hands-on component dealing with proper use of the pH meter. And my final recommendation is to require individual sushi operators to complete this newly developed standardized sushi training before beginning operations. And in the end, I would like to thank the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets and my supervisor, Angela Montalbano. I would also like to thank my IFPTI mentors, Daniel, Kathy, Joseph, and Doug for their advice and reassurance and patience throughout this year. And I would like to give a shout out to my fellows from cohort 8. Couldn't do it without them. Thank you. And let me go back to the question slides. At this point, I would like to take your questions.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Leo, if you don't mind popping your question slide back up. And I see we have some questions starting to come in. So just a reminder to everyone, feel free to type your questions for Leo and Leo's project. I know one question, Leo, that came up is, and you mentioned this, so what constitutes an improper use of a pH meter?
Well, what I can speak from my personal experience and anecdotal evidence, what I've noticed a lot of time operators do, they, during calibration, when they're supposed to use the buffer solutions to calibrate their pH meter, they turn on and turn off the device instead of one continuous calibration. They stop it and they turn it on again. I've seen people prepare slurry and put it in a very small container where the probe of the pH meter would actually would reach the bottom of the container and it would not fit into the slurry, so it was incomplete submersion.
Okay, good. And we have another question. Someone would like to know, it looks like they cut off before they finished asking their question, but it has to do with what is the name of the variance needed by, and I'm guessing needed by New York Department of Ag and Markets? Because you mentioned variance. Could you talk a little bit about that, Leo?
Right, so in New York State, on our website, there's a section where a prospective business, to apply for specialized food processing, so for example, vacuum packaging or sushi, they would print out that form and sign it and agree to comply with the rules. For example, with the sushi, it will say that pH of rice has to be kept below 4.1. So they're not supposed to begin operations until they submit that variance. They're planning to comply with it and obey by those rules.
Okay, great. Here's another question for you. As a state inspector, I have used various brands of pH meters. Some brands are easier and more accurate than others. Are there any new pH meters on the market that you use or would you recommend?
Well, I can't really endorse any particular brand, but what I would say, it would be beneficial for the operators to have at least 2 pH meters on site because they tend to get broken quite frequently, and it's good to have a backup since they're supposed to use them daily.
Okay. And someone would like to know if some operators, in your experience, have they pushed back and want to utilize pH test strips instead of pH meter?
In my experience, no. They've been pretty compliant, and pH meter seems to be carry the day. Plus, pH meter is the way to go.
Okay. And I know in your recommendations you mentioned some standardized training, and this question is, isn't there a standard training manual for seafoods?
Right. So firm managers or owners, they may complete that training, but the people on the ground, the actual chefs, they do not always receive the same level of training. So by those recommendations, I want to make sure that that training, that knowledge gets passed down to the people who are actually doing the work.
Okay. And so would that apply also to SOPs as well? That is
Right.
part of the question. Okay.
Right. So, as they say, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So if it doesn't get passed down, then it doesn't get used.
Got it. Also, here's another question. Is the study only for sushi rice or the so-called sushi roll that consists of sushi rice, raw or uncooked cooked fish and veggies and seaweeds?
Bacillus cereus contaminates all sorts of rice, so it would still be a pathogen of concern.
Got it. So it's the rice component.
Right.
Do you require just the variance in New York or a HACCP plan as well?
So wholesale does require seafood HACCP. Individual retail operators, most of them do not have seafood HACCP training, and they would likely benefit from it.
Got it. So the training component is is where that needs to focus. Good. Okay. And are there any other questions for Leo? I see we're kind of slowing down at this point. I'll give it a second to see if anyone has one last question for you. And then if we don't get you in time, feel free to email Leo if you'd have more specific questions that you'd like to follow up on. Well, we might have one more. Let's see. Okay, here we go, Leo. Can a supermarket chain use one sushi retailer in one of their establishments to supply all the markets? Do you understand that question?
Right.
Okay.
In New York State, I know of, I did not come across it in my personal experience. But I don't think it would be practical for them to use supermarket space. From my experience, those areas are very small. They're just leasing like a cooler and a counter, so they don't really have much space to supply multiple locations.
Got it. Yeah, and I think maybe what they're getting at too is that, maybe it crosses into a situation where you go from retail to manufacturing in that situation when you're supplying multiple stores. So maybe that's kind of what the question is alluding to. Okay. All right. Well, at this point, Leo, thank you very much. Thanks for your presentation today. And if you can give up control, we'll go to our next presenter. And Mike, if you'd like to take over, the floor is yours.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Otzberger for the City of Milwaukee Health Department, and my project is Food Safety Risk Factors at the City of Milwaukee, Wisconsin Temporary Events. So welcome to the City of Milwaukee. We're on the western shore of Lake Michigan. Milwaukee is also the largest and only first-class city in Milwaukee and is the 31st largest city in the United States. It encompasses 96 square miles and a population of around 600,000. Each year, there are over 100 separate temporary events in the city of Milwaukee and over 400 inspections conducted per year. There are also many challenges with temporary events. Staffing is a big issue. A lot of people have summer vacations. Most of them require overtime because it's nights or weekend events. There's also many challenges dealing with operators, with food safety knowledge, beginners, volunteers, nonprofits, teenagers. Physical facilities vary greatly. Equipment availability varies. There's lack of regulation. The food code is very basic for temps. Only operator in the city of Milwaukee that does not require a certified food manager. And also it's the only operator that is not graded in the city of Milwaukee. There's no commercial kitchen needed. And water sources, there are many challenges with temporary events. Also, over 1 million people attend our various events throughout the year. So this is our largest event, Summerfest. It's a 10-day event. Over 750,000 people usually attend. And we have events ranging on this end all the way down to events that are 1 or 2 establishments, such as a fair, festival, church event. And this is your typical setup. Festival workers, on the left-hand side, you can see there's no protection, so you have cross-contamination waiting to happen, cramped corridors, so cooling issues, but potentially, is there hand wash set up? Are they getting water from an approved source, or is it from a garden hose they hooked up to a spigot they found in the area? And on the right is more of your proper setup, display in the front and food setup in the back. And so for my project, I only looked at food establishments that are actually processing food. Which brings me to my problem statement. The characterization of food safety risk factors related to temporary food establishments in the city of Milwaukee is currently unknown. Prior to 2016, we did not fill out inspection reports at events. Starting in 2016, we had a carbon form that we were able to fill out and keep track of violations per establishment per year. And last year we did do inspections right into our health space inspection system. And this year kind of COVID ruined temp events. So until recently, violations were not kept track of and we lacked the ability to analyze our reports. So now is the time to see what is going on at our events and to create interventions for violations that we are repeatedly seeing. My research questions. Are the food safety risk factors found at temporary events similar to those found at brick and mortar establishments or restaurants? And what are the most common violations occurring at temporary events in the city of Milwaukee? Methodology. Review temporary event inspection reports and match with the same number of brick and mortar establishments. So I looked at all temporary events conducted each year from May through September, and I looked at the same amount of brick and mortar establishments that were processing potentially hazardous food. We looked at violations found between years, temps versus brick and mortar, and that was for the last 3 years, compare and contrast between temp and brick and mortar establishments. So my study population, last year in 2019, 478 temporary event inspections were conducted. There was a similar amount of brick and mortar establishments that were looked at to compare and contrast. 2018, we did a little more with 529, and 2017 was 411. So my results, the top 3 temporary event CDC risk factor violations were cross-contamination, improper holding, and personal hygiene. So there is a low incidence of cross-contamination at temporary food establishments, probably due to the fact that there is more limited menu and many items are prepped beforehand. There was a much higher risk of improper temperatures. Keeping food hot or cold can be very difficult at outside events. Temperatures tend to fluctuate. you might have a reefer truck or equipment go down that you aren't able to repair in time. Also, cooling, there's less space for that. And there's also a high occurrence of poor personal hygiene. Providing an approved way to wash hands at temporary events can be a challenge due to lack of running water or just the location of the event. And also for our personal hygiene results, they might be underreported due to the fact that we won't typically conduct an inspection until the establishment has a hand wash station set up. Our top results for brick and mortar CDC risk factor violations were cross-contamination, improper holding, and personal hygiene. So there's much higher incidence of cross-contamination at brick and mortar establishments due to bigger space, bigger menu, bigger staff, and a lot more prepping being done. And that might include some prepping for temporary food establishments. Similar rates of improper holding and personal hygiene. The most commonly occurring violations for temporary event and brick and mortar establishments were cold holding, hot holding, hand washing, and cross-contamination. So these could be due to extreme conditions at temporary events and a lack of a controlled environment, which operate or lack of proper equipment for the cold holding and hot holding, and cross-contamination, like I said, cramped space, lack of proper prep areas, etc. And most common brick and mortar violations, cross-contamination, hand washing, and cold holding. Cross-contamination was the highest, again, probably due to the size of the operation or the scope of the menu. Hand washing, multiple areas, more people working, so you might see more opportunities missed for proper hand washing. And hot holding is much less, probably due to the fact that there's a proper electrical source and equipment is in a much more stable environment. So in conclusion, temporary events show similar amounts of violations for 2 of the top 3 categories of risk factors, as well as their brick and mortar restaurants. Temporary events have a much lower occurrence of cross-contamination due to smaller footprint, and a lot of food is prepped beforehand in a brick and mortar establishment. Due to the volume of food they produce and the amounts of people served, these risk categories should have interventions created for operators in order to reduce their violations. Consumer Environmental Health Department should consider requiring that a certified food manager certification be required for any temporary food establishment that processes potentially hazardous food items. Consumer Environmental Health Department should hold an annual seminar for temporary food event operators prior to the temporary event season to go over previous year's most common violations, cover any questions. CHD should distribute current hand washing reminder handout materials, provide handouts and additional information for operators about proper cooking, holding temperatures, setup, proper food handling, and storage of food. And the CHD should examine the current effectiveness of the City of Milwaukee temporary food establishment strategies. Lastly, the information and data from this project should be shared with the FDA and other jurisdictions for educational purposes or training of regulators performing temporary food establishment inspections. I would like to acknowledge Deputy Commissioner Claire Evers for giving me the opportunity to join the IFPTI Cohort 8. My coordinator, Julie Holtz, for pushing me to apply. All of my MHD inspectors for working on the weekends, last minute, taking care of all the events that come up. My fellow fellows for their hard work and impressive projects. My mentor, Joe Corby, for all the help and guidance he provided along the way, and IFPTI for providing us with this opportunity. Thank you. Any questions?
Okay, thanks, Mike. Yeah, we do have some questions coming in for you. Here's one. Regulatory agencies are always fearful of outbreaks from large temporary events. Have there been any confirmed illnesses or complaints of illnesses associated with the Milwaukee Summerfest Festival?
I've received a couple of complaints, but I've had yet to confirm anything.
Okay.
Oftentimes we don't get complaints until days after the event, so it's kind of hard to go back and look at the food items that it might have been, because by the time we get there, they're already gone, just through the volume that they do each day.
Okay. And I was thinking this one as well as you were presenting. I assume you didn't do any inspections this year. Maybe we're wrong, but the question is, do you miss inspecting the TFEs this year? Can you fill us in on what happened this year during COVID?
It was a real big difference, and I felt bad hearing from all of my temporary event coordinators, you know, saying that they were canceling, and just what they were going through was tough to hear. And you know, it's, as that work wasn't there, definitely COVID kind of filled in the gap. So I guess it was kind of a good thing. But.
Okay. Here's another question for you. Did you look at brick and mortar establishments only inspected during the same time frame as the temporary events?
I did. I took a general May through September for our brick and mortar establishments, because that was a similar amount of routine inspections conducted during that time frame. So I thought it'd be even looking at both the temps during that time frame and the restaurants.
Okay. Here's a question. Do you think that cross-contamination was seen less because the EHSs may not be present during a lot of the food prep at the temporary event? Is that a possibility?
It's definitely a possibility. I mean, we've come across establishments that, yeah, we found corn.
Grenadines, they have standard for catering, and the challenges they see there is they finding resources to monitor and to seek corrections for non-compliance. So do you see similar things in the Milwaukee events?
We do. So the way ours kind of worked was we were issuing the licenses at the time of inspection. So if an establishment wasn't passing, they weren't getting their license that day, or we would come back later until they were properly set up. So we were kind of had a little extra incentive for them to fix their issues.
Okay. And then do you know when are the temporary establishments inspected at the event? At the beginning, in the middle, or at the end of the event?
I mean, well, it depends on the size of the event. So if there's 5 booths, when we get there, we usually try to get there right around a little before opening, where they are prepping to get ready to go. But if you get there too early, then they're just setting up and they're not doing any food prep. And if you get there too late, you've missed the food preparation. So it's kind of hard to judge sometimes when to send staff at an event.
Got it. Yeah, it's always a challenge. Another question for you. At the beginning, you mentioned temporary events not requiring a commercial kitchen.
Right.
Is that a rule specific in Milwaukee? Because in Hawaii, if an applicant looks to utilize their home kitchen, we look at what food items are proposed to be sold at the event. In other words, if they're non-potentially hazardous or potentially hazardous foods. Can you elaborate a little on that?
So we do have like the cookie bill, and so certain bakery items or low acid products, that kind of stuff, can be sold without a license, but any potentially hazardous food would need a license to sell, and would need either to be prepared at a commercial kitchen or prepared at the event. We don't allow things made from home that are potentially hazardous to be sold.
Okay. Here's a question. Are temporary units inspections scheduled? And
no.
Do they know you're coming?
No.
They do not know you're coming. Okay.
No, I mean, typically the first day of the event, we're there at least. So, I mean, they figure that they can expect to see us sometime during the event for sure, but it's not set by time or anything.
Okay. Another question for you. Did you make comparisons based on the menu and operation of temporary and brick and mortar types of establishments, same day versus same day, etc.? Does that make sense?
I mean, the restaurants that I was looking at were, processing more than just, pre-packed frozen pizzas or something like that. So it was your moderate establishments to more complex.
Okay.
I don't know the same day to same day.
Got it. So here's another one, Mike. How much of a hardship do you believe it would be for a temporary food event operator to become a certified food protection manager?
I guess it would depend on how many events they plan on doing throughout the year. If they were doing many events almost every weekend, I would think that they should have somebody able to handle that. But if it was just a one-time event, that might be a little more difficult to, require a test that's $130 to do the course and a test. So I don't know.
Okay. Someone suggests that what they do is have, when they have big events, they bring people in for certification and training sessions. Do you utilize any of those options?
Usually before temp season kicks off, we'll have an operator training session, and we'll kind of go over violations, proper setup, that kind of thing. But right now we don't do any CFM training. Okay.
So just, I think when they were looking at your recommendations, they thought, well, here's another idea.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Mm-hmm. And what other options are there to address the risk factors at temporary events?
I guess it's, keep an eye on or analyzing our reports and finding what we're consistently seeing and try to, change operators' behavior and maybe even look at the events themselves. Is there something there that's causing these violations to occur as well? I mean, is it location of the event or setup, or is it lacking something? It might not be just on the operator.
Okay, Mike, I think the questions are slowing down here, so I think we'll wrap things up. Thank you very much for your presentation today.
Thanks.
And if you can give up control, we'll go to our next presenter. And Rhiannon, would you like to take over?
Hello, everybody. Let me get to my screen. That I conducted through IFPTI's Fellowship in Food Protection. To begin, though, I want to ask you all a question. Please speak up if you have never of my research. The topic of my presentation today is identifying performance challenges of standardized food sanitarians within Michigan's local health departments. So to begin, I want to share a little background information. Michigan has created what is called the Michigan Food Safety Inspection Officer Standardization Training Program for all new incoming food sanitarians at both the state and local level. But what does that mean? It means simply this, that this standardized training program was designed to train a new individual on their new responsibilities and role, and to assess their ability to conduct a risk-based inspection based on identifying up to 54 major food safety risks that are observed during a routine inspection. Through a multi-tiered approach, Michigan's standardized training program is comprised of 4 key training elements. First is technical training on food safety. This is commonly conducted through 37 online FDA ORU courses and covers topics such as food law, HACCP principles, and microbiology of foodborne pathogens. Second, the new inspector must conduct 25 joint field inspections with their standardized field officer. It's through these inspections that the new inspector is provided the real-world experiences on how to conduct those risk-based inspections as required. Third, the new sanitarian must complete 25 independent or solo inspections. And finally, the new sanitarian must complete 5 evaluated food inspections under the unassisted observation of their standardized food trainer. However, with all of the new training that a new food sanitarian receives, there are possible factors that may contribute to post-standardization performance challenges. For example, factors such as the overall effectiveness of the training program, lack of food safety knowledge retention after training has been completed, and competing workload pressures may prevent sanitarians from performing routine inspections as they were originally trained. This may lead to numerous preventable risks. For example, urban and rural communities may be at higher risk for foodborne illness outbreaks due to unobserved food safety risks during those inspections. Uniformity in inspection processes across Michigan may become degraded, which would reduce multi-jurisdictional collaboration, and inspector credibility with facility owners and operators would be significantly hindered, which may lead to issues gaining or maintaining compliance within that facility. And this leads me to my problem statement. Performance challenges preventing newly standardized food safety sanitarians from adhering to Michigan's standardized food program training inspection format are currently unknown. To research this project, I developed the following research questions. Number 1, what are the main performance challenges experienced during food service inspections as identified by food sanitarians post-standardization? What differences in performance challenges are observed between rural and urban area local health departments? And what additional training can be implemented to address these identified performance challenges? The following methodology was used to conduct the research. An electronic survey was created using Google Forms, and a link was emailed to all of the food program supervisors of each of the local health departments that agreed to participate in this project. The link was then forwarded on to their staff of food sanitarians for completion. Survey questions focused on topics such as length of training, training topics, as well as descriptions of post-standardization challenges experienced and suggestions for additional training. The data was analyzed using Google Sheets, and finally, all of the qualitative data that was obtained was grouped into light categories and compared for similarities and differences. The study populations for this project were food sanitarians from 5 urban and 5 rural local health departments. Urban and rural health departments were defined using geographical location and population size of the health department within the state, as shown in the map here. The number of food sanitarians the department staffed, as well as the size of each of the department's relative coverage area. After a survey period of 30 days, the following results were captured. The highlighted areas here are the 4 key training elements that I described earlier. The survey showed that urban food sanitarians completed the 4 key training elements in the following ways. 88% completed the technical coursework, 90% completed the joint field inspections, 63% completed the independent inspections, and 90% completed the evaluated inspections. Likewise, the survey showed that rural food sanitarians completed the 4 training elements in the following ways. 87% completed the technical coursework, 100% completed the joint field inspections, 67% completed their independent inspections, and 93% completed their evaluated inspections. Moving on to the results of the post-standardization challenges experienced. So for this aspect of the survey, the sanitarians were able to use short answers to cite the challenges that they experienced, which allowed for more than 1 challenge response per sanitarian. The top three challenges are highlighted here. First are procedure-related challenges, such as departmental policies, equipment and software training, as well as cross-training with land use services and type 2 water supplies. The challenge was experienced, 11% of the urban sanitarians and 32% of the rural sanitarians experienced this challenge. Next in line were conflict or conflict resolution issues, with 27% of the urban and 11% of the rural food sanitarians noting this challenge. It is worth noting here that this survey also showed that 8% of the urban and 26% of the rural food sanitarians experienced lack of confidence during independent inspections post-standardization. The final aspect of the survey allowed both urban and rural sanitarians to offer suggestions for additional training. The survey results showed that 19% of the results obtained from urban food sanitarians suggested conflict resolution training as an addition to their existing training program, which is followed closely by soft skills training at 17%. The survey also showed that 29% of the responses obtained from rural food sanitarians suggested an improvement to their existing procedural leading training. This is followed closely again by conflict resolution training at 18%. These results led to the following conclusions. First, new food sanitarians in both rural and urban health departments are not fully completing the standardized training program, with the exception of the joint field inspections by rural food sanitarians. Second, urban and rural food sanitarians do indeed exhibit different performance challenges than their counterparts. And third, both study populations express the desire for additional training to be included within their existing training program. I formulated the following recommendations. Number one, local health departments should work with the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, or MDARD for short, to discuss the preparedness of each of their department's new food sanitarians and receive final standardization approval from MDARD. Second, local health departments and MDARD should work collaboratively to create and implement additional training, such as mandatory conflict training, resolution training, which may extend the existing 4 key training elements to 5 or more as deemed necessary. And finally, local health departments and MDARD should create a post-standardization survey that assesses training knowledge retention, post-standardization challenges, and any suggestions for training improvement. And this survey should be provided to all new food sanitarians within 6 to 9 months of training. Now at this time, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge a large group of people that helped inspire and motivate me throughout this process. I would like to thank Craig Camel, Jerry Voitala, and the whole IFPTI team. I would like to thank all of my IFPTI mentors, and especially Dan Gump, the Health Department of Northwest Michigan, for allowing me the time and space to complete this fellowship, for my family, for their unwavering love and support throughout this process, to the 10 health departments that agreed to participate in this project, to Brandon Morrill for encouraging me to apply for this fellowship and for the continued support throughout the process, and my fellow members of Cohort 8. Holy cannoli, you all amaze and inspire me every day. And finally, I want to thank all of you, our captive audience, over these past 3 Fridays of presentations. And at this time, I would like to welcome any and all questions.
Okay, great job, Rhiannon. So feel free at the bottom of your screen to go to the Q&A box and type in a question for Rhiannon about her project. And I'm seeing maybe a couple starting to come in. Rhiannon, you mentioned training and kind of having a new standardized training to address some of the things in your project. How do you envision, how do you see that, and who would be the trainers for that, and who would develop that? Could you elaborate?
That's a great question. So at this point, I would say almost all of the local health departments, they have standardized trainers within their health departments. And ideally, what I'm looking at is improving what we already have. So what I was finding throughout this process is there are just some gaps in between what is expected of us and what we are actually trained to do. And so the idea is to kind of figure out what some of those challenges are in order to improve what we already have. And this would be basically provided through our standardized trainers.
Okay, good. Another question, do you have any theories on why urban inspectors or sanitarians run across issues with conflict versus rural area sanitarians? Any theories on that?
Yeah, I have some theories. There are thoughts of, depending on what types of facilities that we have in urban areas that maybe we don't have in rural areas. So, you know, we might not have as a culturally diverse food facilities in rural areas as maybe they do in urban areas. But again, that would just be assuming what they have there. But there's also other items too, where the thought process is that if we have a larger a health department, a rural or an urban health department that maybe has a larger staff, are there problems with turnover there? So okay. It could be, again, if we are trying to train a lot of people over a short amount of time, you know, they're not fully assessing, or maybe they're not fully retaining all the information that they were trained on, which leads to that lack of confidence, which might lead to those issues of trying to resolve conflict if they experience that during routine inspections. Okay, good.
And Rhiannon, you mentioned that in terms of performance challenges, that one contributing thing might be pressures from the job. Could you elaborate on that a little bit, what some of those things might be?
Absolutely. I think that a lot of this training program is really focused on trying to get a sanitarian through training in order to get them onto the floor and into our restaurants. And so there might be this sort of unrealized, or maybe they don't understand the bulk of the other information and the other responsibilities and expectations that they have outside of just going in and doing inspections. So we could have workload pressures of maintaining frequency, making sure that we understand how to adequately do a foodborne illness outbreak investigation. And so there's just other things that are attributed to this job that are just outside of the routine inspection, which a lot of people are basically trained on, that again, lead to those workload pressures that kind of compete with their time to do those routine inspections.
Okay, good. And here's another question. Do you see contentious relationships between state and local jurisdictions as roadblocks to standardization?
No, not at all. I think for what I've experienced with MDARD, they have been incredibly supportive. We have easily been able to reach out to them and bounce questions off of them. Yearly, all of our standardized trainers go through the re-standardization process, or is it every 2 years? I apologize. So they do work well with us. And I think that our line of communication between local health departments and MDARD is actually in a very good place right now.
Okay. And feel free if anyone has any other questions for Rhiannon. I see there's a couple of suggestions. I think everyone can, on the Q&A box, you can see some suggestions coming in, and I'm sure Rhiannon will review some of those. But any other last questions? Give it another split second here. And Rhiannon, I think I'm not seeing any other questions, so I want to thank you for your presentation today. Great job.
Thank you.
Okay, and if you can give the screen back up, thank you. Okay, well, I think we've come to the end of the presentations, and we've been doing this now. This is the third week in July. We'd like to thank AFTO for hosting this, hosting all the fellows in their presentations this year. Thank you all the participants, for attending this session. As a reminder, AFTO will post these webinars and the slides on its website next week. The other ones for the previous weeks have already been posted, so you can go and visit that. But next week, these will be posted as well, so you'll want to make sure you go to the AFTO website for that. And then the full research project papers you can find on IFPTI's website. So please visit, and you can look at their full presentation on IFPTI's website. I'd like to thank Katie, Joe, and Leo, and Mike, and Rhiannon today. I think they did a great job. I'd like to thank you, our audience, as well, for all your support for the fellowship program. We hope you have a great weekend. Thank you.